Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine. You're listening to a new Securing Bridges podcast. You're about to join Alyssa Miller as she sits down with senior and executive security leaders to share stories of success and failure while working across business teams. It's time to build and secure the bridge to the business. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
All right, well, welcome aboard, everybody. Here we are once again. It's Securing Bridges, and I'm Alyssa Miller. So we've reached that point now where I have no idea what number episode we're on anymore. It's gone that well. We're that far along. I'm excited. It's great. We have had some amazing guests on this show. Hopefully you've been able to check them out. Just a reminder, if you missed an episode, we do have the recordings available. You can also check it out on podcast format. So be sure to do that, because up till now, every guest we've had has been just amazing, exciting, new adventures, things I never would have expected have come up on this show. And I'm really excited for this week's guest, because we are going to go something exciting and new, a little bit different direction than maybe some of you would have expected once again. And that's how we prefer to keep things going, because there are so many facets when we talk about cybersecurity in this world that we live in. And thank you for pointing out show 10, apparently. So here we are, 10th episode, and we are coming out with a bang, because this week we have with us Dr. Olivia Snow. Hey, how are you?
Hey, all right. How are you?
I am doing good. Seriously, this is exciting. I'm loving everything we've been able to do on this show, and this week is going to be super cool. So let's tell our viewers why it's going to be super cool. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, one reason it's going to be super cool is the second we started recording, my dog Terse started acting up. So sorry, I'm going to be going back and forth.
We absolutely support fur babies on the show. Yes.
She gets really jealous when I'm like teaching on Zoom and stuff. Okay. So I'm Dr. Olivia Snow. I research sex work, tech, and policy currently at UCLA's Center for Critical Internet Inquiry. I am also a professor and a dominatrix. Okay, Lucy, you will behave. Okay. So I kind of stumbled ass backwards into this position. I got my PhD about like 5 years ago, and the academic job market is even worse than the regular job market, which, as we all know, is dog shit. So I started, well, not started, but, I've been in sex work for on and off about 15 years and, returned to it back in 2019, out of necessity over the summer, because we don't get paid over the summer because academia is garbage. And made the mistake of disclosing to my academic mentor from graduate school what I was doing for work over the summer, because she asked. So in response, she withdrew all of her letters of recommendation for me. So if you're an academic, you typically need 3 letters of rec to apply to tenure track jobs. And she didn't even tell me, so I just found out when I was trying to apply for a job. All of this being a really curious decision to make when you're dealing with a dominatrix. Like, I'm a professional sadist. What the fuck are you doing? So I wrote about it and canceled her in the Chronicle of Higher Education. Now she's a Husker performer herself. But that went viral, and I've since shifted my research focus, which was like labor studies, American studies, to specifically sex work, and especially how tech, because tech might be our biggest predator. How tech tracks us and how to stay safe from that.
So first of all, yeah, I agree with that. It is. I mean, I think tech, for all the good that it does, it creates so many abuse cases as well. In fact, anyone who follows me on Twitter knows my epic arguments about Apple and some of what I feel is their their lack of responsibility in really anticipating and accounting for abuse cases. But I say it's ironic because, at least, I mean, thinking in terms of sex work, at least on the pornography side, if I feel like a lot of tech gets amplified because it's useful in that space. I mean, I've made the joke in my own conference talks. Like, you look at what accelerated the notoriety of deepfakes, what accelerated the notoriety of VHS, for crying out loud. It was pornography.
That's like, Pornhub. People think of Pornhub as like the dumpster of the internet and like getting spam on your, but like they have had such a robust content moderation system for years that, because we're so hyper aware of our precarity, like, even legally, that we want to make sure that we're not, putting anyone at risk or fucking up. We're going to be the first people to report if there's child sexual exploitation material, for example, because we don't want to, I mean, obviously we don't want that, but
yeah. I mean, the reason that all the, so many of I remember from the days of the old videotapes, right at the beginning, was the disclaimer about all participants are over 18, and I don't even know what all it said, but because that's been a concern, right? And
we're the ones who really stand to lose from that. I mean, obviously the victims portrayed more so than us, but after that, like, we need to keep ourselves platformed.
Right. And that's, I mean, I look at the abuse cases and I think I mentioned like deepfakes before, and people have seen me talk a lot about deepfakes. I mean, one of the things that really brought them to the forefront was people making artificial pornography, or artificial in the sense that
content, I think we call it.
I mean, the person they claimed was in this movie was not. That was not Emma Watson, I mean, things like that. It's, but yet then the things that are there even to protect people, right? Like DMCA. For the longest time, DMCA was actually protecting the deepfake creators, claiming that they own the copyright to that content because they created the deepfake. And so I mean, thinking now in terms of the work you do, what types of things are you looking at? Because those are like some of the things I think of when I think about tech being abused, but I'm curious what some of the spaces are that you're looking at in your research.
Well, so what is perhaps unique about my work is I'm not a content creator. I don't make clips. I don't, do porn. I just don't. So there's been a lot of research on, and you may know the collective Hacking Hustling. They've done a lot of work on algorithmic surveillance and, how, I'm getting so distracted with this fucking dog. You come here. Jesus Christ. What the fuck was I even saying? There's a lot of work already, on how we're traced from platform to platform, which is its own like kind of black box. We don't know. I mean, because it's an algorithm that's how algorithms work, like you tell it how to algorithm and then it goes into the algorithms. So we're not really, we have to rely on this kind of like anecdotal data. So Hacking Hustling has been doing a lot of that work, but what I specifically have been looking at is how tech puts in-person workers specifically at risk, and how tech surveys us like in real life. I think a lot of people, we think about like Twitter and smartphones and I don't know, Venmo, whatever, tracking us via our internet usage, but PayPal has been sniffing out and banning sex workers for 20 years, like way longer than social media has even existed. And there's no real, like, how, like, there's no one really knows how we're found out, I guess, in a way, especially pre-social media. So, I'm looking into what exactly is really tracing us. And, the work is really, I don't want to say difficult but like we have to rely on Lucy, you come back here. Hey, she's not usually this bad.
No worries. See, people, completely genuine show. I mean, this is what it's about.
Yeah, no eating barf. Jesus. The cat's acting up too, needless to say. Um, so what's difficult about research is that quantitative research is usually privileged in STEM spaces. Right. People want to see hard, like Zuckerberg's even said, I will only look at quantitative research, and that just doesn't exist for this kind of work, because there's no way of figuring it out. I think of Elon Musk's demented diatribes about the algorithm or whatever. There's not we can't go and just look at the algorithm and tell you the answer. So we rely almost exclusively on qualitative data, and that makes it really difficult for people to listen to us. That makes me think of so the way that I think I came on your radar was DoorDash, right? So back in, I think it was March, maybe April, and this has happened to me multiple times. It actually happened to me once since that one happened, but DoorDash booted me off the platform because I violated terms of service. And, because I do this research, I know that it's because I'm a sex worker. And I'll say that, and people, especially other people in tech spaces who aren't sex workers, will say well, how do you know that? That doesn't sound right. No, you must have violated terms of service. You must have used someone else's credit card, trying to explain that away. And, have you ever heard of that happening to someone who's not a sex worker? No, because it doesn't. It only
I'm at a loss.
Right. And when there are all these other sex workers saying shit, I got kicked off of Uber, I got kicked off of Instagram, I got kicked off of TikTok, and I don't even make anything on TikTok. There's a whole lot of pushback because there's no concrete data we can point to that's look, here's a sex worker code, and once it figures out that you're selling sex, then that's when Mr. DoorDash goes and deletes your account or whatever. It's a very unusual methodology that we have to take, A, to get the data, but B, to get people to take it seriously, which I think is harder than, especially now, harder than, getting it. People don't want to believe it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, which of course always speaks back to the fact that to this day, sex work is this super taboo thing that society just, we want to all pretend like it doesn't exist. And yet I would bet if you really did the studies, probably 95 to near 100% of people have engaged in it either as viewer or whatever else in some way. I mean, would you?
Yeah, who hasn't I don't know what 13-year-old with an internet connection hasn't Googled boobs?
Exactly.
Or engage in transactional sex for if you need to crash somewhere for the night.
Yeah, and that's just it. But we don't want to talk about it. And we don't want to legitimize it. And of course, that I'm sure a lot of that we could argue all day, or probably I don't think we would argue. We'd probably agree.
Yeah, no, we probably
on the sources of where that comes from. But the reality is, we put people in a very dangerous place to begin with, just by the way that we treat this, this industry. And then on top of it, we weaponize a lot of this technology that, as we said, in many cases, was amplified by that exact industry. Now that same technology is weaponized against the industry. And I know that you've had some experience with that, not just with DoorDash, but in other scenarios as well.
Right. Yeah. And this is actually a really interesting question that just disappeared. And there we go. How leading to additional harm and tracking to the consumers of it. Oh, that's interesting. That's actually work that I haven't quite looked so much into, because I think the answer is probably, but they really focus more on the workers I think, because they know they can.
Yeah.
So if you're a consumer, you have a lot more rights. You can, you know, you could like, I don't know. I'm trying to, you know, but like, it's not even like legal rights, but like, as far as like social stigma goes,
Yep.
like they can fuck with sex workers and no one gives a shit because no one gives a shit about sex workers.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, look at it.
Yeah.
I mean, how many people, you know, the difference between how somebody would look at, you know, let's say a dominatrix versus somebody who goes to visit one. Now, I'm not saying there
Right.
won't be any backlash against somebody who visits one and you know, is a consumer of those services. I mean, yeah, people, you know, act, you know, some people look at them like they're weirdos or whatever, you know, that kind of shittiness. But
Like,
as
I
far
regret
as
to inform you all.
yeah, I mean, as far as the dominatrix,
Signs
it's
are
like,
everywhere.
you know, holy cow, like vilifying. And so at the end of the day, yeah, if, well, so and so got caught going to a dominatrix, it's like, okay, you know, whatever,
But
that's
like,
weird.
which happens, you know, in movies or like, if you're a politician, but it in the real world, it's usually, you know, a brothel getting raided, a dungeon getting raided, a
Right.
strip club getting raided. You know, one thing actually I did think about though with tracking is I noticed this when I had both a when I had a smartphone and also was working in a commercial dungeon. You usually have to work like X scheduled shifts a week with, you know, other doms.
Okay.
That I would be on my way home, you know, and I'd be like dicking around on Facebook. And because we'd be in close physical proximity to each other, or because we'd be on the same Wi-Fi network, Facebook would then be doxing my coworkers to me by saying under people you may know.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, conveniently, or maybe not conveniently, but like sex workers are like, sex workers are very good at minding their own business. Like, I don't want to know what a client's name is. I don't want to know what a coworker's name is. As far as I'm concerned, my coworker is named, you know, Mistress Chloe, and that's it. So, you know, I'm happy to eject that information from my memory immediately. But you know, on the flip side of that, that means also, you know, if a client spends a lot of time in a dungeon and is ticking around on Facebook on his way home, like I might be on my way home, and then he sees who I am, then that puts me at a really increased risk of violence. Less so, like, I'm not going to go after a client. That's insane.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I follow that. And it's, what's interesting is it puts you kind of on the forefront, in my opinion, of some things that, like, in general, you know, society in general could benefit from a lot of this work that you're doing because, you know, obviously sex workers being particularly sensitive industry for this because of what we've just been discussing. I mean, the societal views and the potential for violence and other things. But, you know, even outside of that, I don't think people realize, and I have to imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, that probably some of the goal of the work you're doing is being able to educate sex
Oh, yeah.
workers in particular on how to be careful about these sorts of things.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Which then play to the rest of society too.
Right. And that's actually, I meant to say earlier, another thing that Hacking Hustling has been incredible about is giving safety tips. And I mean, not just for sex workers, but for protesters, for instance, or undocumented people, anyone who doesn't need to be surveyed by the state. Oh, I was gonna, I mean, so sex workers are so often referred to in like tech spaces as the canaries in the coal mine. And it's a really apt metaphor, but I don't think people really think too much what that metaphor means. Because, you know, it hinges on the fact that the canary dies.
Yeah.
The metaphor is that the canary is singing and singing and singing, and then it's not singing anymore. And that's how you know that you need to get the fuck out of the coal mine. So, I mean, it's an apt metaphor in one way, and others it's not, since we're, you know, we're so shadow banned also that we might be singing and screaming and whatever the fuck, and people can't hear us regardless. So, you know, I guess that actually is pretty apt for that. Yeah.
No, you've just expanded the metaphor even more.
Yeah, I'm like, damn it.
I mean, at the same time, tech is full of awful metaphors like that, where we use metaphors and we don't really think about, like, okay, what does that actually mean in the real world? Where did that come from? I mean, I can think of a lot of them just off the top of my head, and it's like,
and I'm like from a blue collar family, so I'm like, oh yeah, canary in the coal mine, sure. Like, of course.
I mean,
like, and then the canary dies.
Yeah, because that's a commonly used term, not just, I mean, in this sense, obviously, within tech, it's used all over the place. We talk about canary tokens that, we in security leverage to know when we're being attacked and things of that nature. So,
yeah.
Hell, we have a tech company named after this concept. So, there's that too. But, what are you going to do? No, seriously, though, it's so, I mean, as you look at this, I can't even imagine the complexity, but how much does that taboo also limit the amount of research you're able to do? Because I can think of other parallels.
Well, I can say that I've been, I guess informally, unofficially, whatever, doing this research just to keep myself safe for 15 years. I was just writing about this the other day. I remember when I was in college, there was some picture of like there was some like adult content, like some details on it. Anyway, someone under it posted like, "Oh, is this?" and put my like government name on there. And the reason I found it is because it came up on my Google results, and it wasn't me. It was some content creator, but it started popping up in like the image, and of course this was 20 some years ago, whatever. So Google isn't quite what it, or wasn't quite what it is now, but I've been, I guess, teaching myself so that shit like that doesn't ruin my vanilla career. But I can also say that so I now I work with UCLA, and I've worked with NYU. I can say that if I reach out to some, or if a journalist, let's say, as Dr. Olivia Snow, and I'm coming from a at ucla.edu email or at nyu.edu, then I'm going to, people are going to see the prestige in that and take me seriously. If they get an email from Mistress Snow at protonmail.com, they're going to be like, who is this hooker? Like, what? And think it's a joke. Not even like think like, oh, this person isn't a serious researcher, or like, oh, this they'll think it's like a prank. Like that I'm trying to fuck with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I'd say the stigma very much keeps the research or makes research difficult. Like even I think there are a few other workers who have academic positions. Think of like Lorelei Lee. They're a porn performer. Danielle Blunt, she's another dominatrix. Bardo Smith, another dominatrix who have worked, with Cornell or Harvard or whatever. And one thing I realized when I started doing this work was like, shit, I need a first name. Like even just being like, hi, I'm Snow, like that's not a name, that's a weather event. Like I like Mistress Blunt too, she goes by Danielle Blunt. So like Olivia here. Even a few days ago I had some I'm forever besieged by stalkers and doxers of academia, a lot in medieval Twitter. Really weirdly, there's something fucked up in the water of medieval Twitter. But just a couple days ago I saw some of them saying like, well, Olivia Snow is her fake name that she uses to contact institutions. And I'm like, well, I mean, kinda. I do indeed contact institutions. Like, that's why I use this name. So institutions will listen to me. Like, yeah, correct response.
It's dumbfounding. I just the way people look at it. I mean, one of the things I really love about even just your Twitter handle, I mean, like the juxtaposition, as some would see it, and admittedly, as we're conditioned to see it, of mistress and PhD, like,
which was by design, because
I have no doubt.
Really like fucking with people. If that's
I mean, throw it in their face. Sometimes that's what's needed, right?
It's
I mean,
also a great
let's
marketing
be,
tool.
you know, it challenges all these really weird, you know,
Yeah.
preconceptions that we have. And
Well,
even
and
if,
that like even I had no idea how many academic sex workers were before I went fire. I'm not even the only Mistress Snow PhD. There's another one. Her PhD is in chemistry, if I recall correctly, and she works in Los Angeles.
oh, this is fascinating.
Yeah, I'm like,
I
I
didn't
know
see
you.
us going this route today, but okay.
Right. Is it, or like, I get emails from tenured professors at like top research institutions who will be like, oh yeah, I dommed when I was in graduate school, so thanks for writing this. And I'll be like, I have your book. Like,
Right?
we're everywhere.
But that's the thing. Like
Yeah,
we
even other academic sex workers don't expect to see that many other academic sex workers.
sure.
Yeah.
But that's because of what we and the stories we tell about who sex workers are, and even just in that itself, and this is getting a little meta, but just like, okay, well, sex workers are bad because they're these kind of people, but these kind of people, however we define that in and of itself, is so shitty to say that
Right.
inherently is a bad person. Like, no.
Well, and
And
we don't say that. It's so gendered. We don't say that. We'll say that about drug users, right? But we don't say that about drug dealers. We're not like, oh, or I mean, maybe we do, but it's like a different conversation. We can think of someone like, oh, of course they had to turn to criminalized labor to support a family, to raise their kids, to send their kids to school. People don't say that about sex workers.
no, and I mean, some of it's criminalized, a lot of it isn't. And that's
Oh
the other
yeah. Oh,
thing, right?
which
Like, I mean,
makes exactly zero difference.
yeah,
Like, yeah.
I mean,
Um,
and
and I think
that's what's crazy to me, because I can think of how many people I know who've been engaged in different areas of sex work, who did it to put themselves through school or whatever else, or
get food on the
just
table.
did
I
it
used
because,
to
hey,
sugar specifically just to like get a meal at a nice restaurant out of it. Like literally food on the table is the what I'm getting. But yeah, I remember when I was battling my former mentor however many years ago, I'm like, how can I make horophobia work for me? um, so I was like, well, doming's not even illegal. It's not like I'm not an escort. But like it's totally fine. Guess how effective that was.
it's not, because
No,
yeah,
no,
it all
not at
gets
all.
bumped in the sand. I
Right.
mean, which is ridiculous. And the other thing is, even like that weird, like, well, they were forced to do that because they had no other options. Maybe that's what they enjoy doing.
Right. Yeah, it shouldn't be legitimized by like necessity. Like that
Right.
shouldn't be survival sex work, and sex work that people don't actually want to do is it shouldn't be the way that we uh accept it morally.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is where, like, now I'm wrapping things all around, because that's what I do on this show. It's like, so now it's like,
Like
it's
eye on the
changing
clock.
those perceptions first and foremost, is like so much a part of what has to happen just to get tech to even start to see and care about the fact that
Yeah.
these things that we create are being abused in these ways, and literally creating major safety issues. But like my argument with Apple, for instance, again, if people who follow me on Twitter know, I've been really strongly vocal about the whole AirTag situation,
Oh my fucking
and the
god.
obvious stalking implications that they were even made aware of before those things were released. And they did some, but they didn't put adequate, in my opinion,
Well,
attention on,
clearly.
well, clearly, because yeah, it's been
Yeah.
abused for exactly the purpose that everybody said it was going to be abused for. And, and I guess I'm curious in your, as someone who's directly impacted by it in a very sensitive fashion. So maybe more so than like just even any other woman out there who's maybe doesn't have that same threat model. Where do you see the line as far as these tech companies and the level to which they should be going versus what they are going today to protect people from abuses. Maybe those people might not be paying users of their product.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Right?
I mean, they're not. They're not. They don't
No,
give
they're
a
definitely not.
shit. They don't. They could not care less until they have to. They're doing as little as possible. And I mean, I can't think of it. I know I have like an example on the tip of my tongue that I'm like not getting it. But the fact that they know this, they'll like, oh, okay, we hear you. And then, I was thinking like, and this sounds tangential, but it'll come back around. I think, I've pitched a bunch of publications to write about like why tech workers need to listen to sex workers, to, for human rights issues and privacy issues. And I've been turned down let's say 3 times off the top of my head. I've been turned down by publication. And within a month, there's another article written by a non-sex worker about why tech workers need to listen to sex workers. And I'm like, what did I just fucking tell you? Like, oh my God.
Where did you get that idea? Wow. Wonder.
Jesus Christ. And of course you can't get it right because that's a certain level of lived experience that you're not gonna ever think about. Like, for instance, I have 2 phones. I have a work phone and I have my personal phone. I used to be better at this, but I've gotten kind of lazy. But like, I know don't have them on the same Wi-Fi network ever. Don't have them turned on at the same time ever. Don't like have them next to each other. These are things that a sex worker is going to know, and maybe like a spy, but like beyond that, and tech is interested, I think, in saying that they're listening to sex workers and getting the clout and the social justice points of listening to sex workers, but they are absolutely not doing that.
So you said something I'm actually curious about. You said sex workers would know that. Is it that prevalent, or do you feel like there's actually like a wide swath of that industry we still need to connect to and actually educate on these topics?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'd say the majority of, and I don't have the data on this. I'd say the majority. Well, of course, because it's so difficult to get the data on this, because it's fucking criminalized.
Right.
But the majority of sex workers aren't like career workers. It tends to be a night off, or like a night here, a night there. I need to afford X and I can't. I'm stuck at so and so's house and I don't know how to get home. So that is transactional sex, might not be sex work. So of course that's not going to be in the on the forefront of just like a casual worker's mind, especially, or a lot of workers, especially the most precarious of us, like don't even have 1 cell phone, let alone like 2. But no, I would say, yeah, no, you're the reason that I have these to take these precautions is because I do this research and because I have been in this industry for quite a long time. Yeah, which is also why I need to listen to sex workers. Because yeah, no, you're right that most workers aren't going to know that.
Someone who plaster that on a sign somewhere. Like I'm ready to go buy a billboard and just say tech needs to listen to sex workers.
Well, I mean, the sex worker who's going to be like, "Dear Wired, my name is Dr. Olivia." Like, I'm going to know that information. The ones who, who's like reaching out to these tech companies.
But seriously though, I mean, it's not just, but it is exceptionally important, first of all, to protect sex workers because of the way that these abuses impact them. But the value, because, when we're talking about building bridges with these organizations and trying to get them to hear us, you got to tell them what's in it for them. The value of understanding those threat models and how that plays out in this technology, because I can tell you the things you just talked about, how you treat your burner phone and everything else. There's a lot of people in tech who have burner phones who don't understand the concepts that you were just describing.
because that, like, we're the ones who are immediately experiencing the cross-platform surveillance.
Yeah.
Well, and I was saying, like, I don't try to get these like publications or whatever, like for my help or to put on my CV or whatever. Like, I have this information, but there are a lot of workers who do not, who are going to suffer because they don't have it and they're not going to get it. Like it's I'm not trying to like save myself here. And I know we're kind of we're kind of running out of time, but I think as far as why tech companies need to worry, FOSTA SESTA, and y'all know that. So FOSTA SESTA was this legislation that passed in 2018 that really it was kind of like the first real challenge to Section 230 and holds platforms accountable for what they call prostitution on their platforms. So, and prostitution could mean fucking anything. But that really gave these companies the green light to just kick sex workers off and then, say that they're stopping trafficking or whatever. But if you really look at the verbiage of the law, which is just a incredible demented ass document, a lot of these tech companies could really be putting themselves at risk of like sex trafficking felony charge by not being proactive about sex workers' privacy. And I don't, the FOSTA SESTA, they see, we're just like the collateral damage of FOSTA SESTA. We get kicked off Twitter. We get, we lose Backpage, whatever the fuck. But it really, it's these tech companies don't escape liability by booting us off.
Right.
And if you look at the legislation, then their kind of laissez-faire attitude, I'm thinking of like Twitter specifically because they actually tolerate us, can often put us at more risk of stuff like trafficking. In such a way that like the steps that they are taking to be in compliance by entirely throwing sex workers under the bus because they don't give a fuck about trafficking. They don't care. They care about getting sued. Could actually be like really implicating them in this.
Yeah, and that's the thing that it just feels like holy shit. Here's some real value. Again, because I'm always thinking like, how do I get the business to listen? I have to talk dollars and cents. So, and the potential of lawsuits and things is always a big hammer to swing. So I'm as I was listening to you talk about it, that even I'm thinking like, wow, I hope there's some corporate lawyers listening.
Well, like Twitter doesn't consider government name doxing, right? So if someone puts my government name next to Mistress Snow and then they Google that name and then they find out exactly where I'm teaching and when, because I'm still a professor, and then, I face whatever type of violence, sounds like that tech company is implicated under FOSTA SESTA.
Right. And so, these are, thankfully it looks like Elon Musk isn't going to buy Twitter now. So I'm glad that that's not going to happen. But
fucker.
I'm looking at where that could have headed us, right? Like the absolute just disaster that could have been.
Just the mass exodus of good employees from Twitter who are like, peace, fuck that, I'm not working with him. Like that, if I ever see that.
Yeah. Oh, I promise you are definitely one of millions in that camp.
Yeah, but I'm taking one of his eyeballs with me. No way, I shouldn't.
No, we're not.
Kidding. Satire.
We're not actually. We're not supporting violence here unless it's consensual.
Consensual.
Yes, always consensual. That then, yeah. Awesome. Well, unfortunately, as you point out, we're actually bumping right up against time, man. That went by fast.
Right.
There's so much more I feel like I can learn from you. There's definitely so much more the tech industry can learn from you. And, a
lot of us have a lot, I have my, specific expertise, but there's a lot of shit that people are going to find out about, but not until it's too late.
So if you could give people, last question, if you could give people one place to go, one idea, one thing that they can do thinking in terms of probably tech, because a lot of our viewers are going to be from the tech industry. What can they do to help get the rest of tech to listen?
Well, I think the only reason tech listens to me is because I have institutional backing. Even with a PhD in my, the letters after my name, they don't give a,
right.
And I think to platform workers, even shit as simple as having an institutional email address has made a world of difference. And that's fucking ridiculous, especially because I already have a bunch of institutional email addresses. They're just under my government name. But giving institutional backing, institutional funding if possible. But tech workers have clout, and we may not think of themselves as having clout and be like, well, I'm just an engineer and I only make $80,000. Whatever. You still have a billion times more clout than the average sex worker who probably knows more about your job than you do, and perhaps might also have a degree in engineering. So putting your job, not job security, but the institutional backing on the line, to uplift, other voices that aren't going to be heard otherwise, even just to say like, yo, I have this friend who has some, really great insights about this. Maybe we can bring her on as, an advisor or whatever. And like, I hate that to get the structural bias to change. It has to happen on this stupid privileged interpersonal level, where people with power talk to people they know personally and get them into power, and then at that point we can actually start making some kind of structural moves.
Okay, well, cool. So, and that's a story we hear a lot. Honestly, like people, when you have that I hate to use this term because they turn off the minute you use the term, but privilege of being in a position like that, use that freaking privilege.
I'm in an extremely privileged position because I have this institutional backing, because I have a PhD, because I'm a white woman. There's people need to be less, guilty about doing, less, loath to admit that, no, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It might mean you're a bad person if you keep on being fucking weird about it.
Exactly. All right. Well, unfortunately, I got to wrap things up. Like I said, I know we could go on for probably a few hours, and I think I've said that at the end of almost every episode. But honestly, this has been great. So, and I mean it every time I say it, because these have been excellent. So, appreciate you coming on. Really appreciate your openness and willing to
Thank you for highlight
some issues that are critically important. Very cool.
It'll happen to you next. No, but really,
talk about there too.
I laugh to keep from. I don't even know what.
I hear you. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the show. As always, recordings are available immediately after. Be available on podcast format in a few days. Check out your favorite podcast platform. I think we're on just about all of them. Keep coming back. We've got awesome guests lined up for the next foreseeable future, I guess, including, I'll drop this little nugget. We have a super exciting guest that will be doing live from RSA in a couple weeks. So if you're going to be at RSA, reach out, let me know. Otherwise, be sure to check out the live stream that week. I believe it'll be June 8th, if I remember right. I think it's the Wednesday that week. So we'll be broadcasting live a super, really cool guest again, like all the others we've had. So keep your eyes up, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Dr. Olivia Snow, thank you so much for joining us, and take care. We'll see you next time on Securing Bridges. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Securing Bridges podcast with Alyssa Miller. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.